Welcome to Mom Bods and Margaritas, where two childhood friends navigate the wild and crazy world of midlife.
That's right. We're diving into the ups and downs of relationships, motherhood, health, sports, and everything in between.
Join us as we share our personal stories, laugh through the challenges, and explore how to thrive in this transformative phase of life. Whether you're feeling lost, empowered, or somewhere in between, we're here to remind you you're not alone.
So grab a coffee or a margarita, settle in, and let's embark on this journey together. It's time to embrace the chaos and celebrate the beauty of midlife. Let's get started.
Well, hey!
Hey!
How was your week?
Well, it's been interesting. Just had a lot going on at work, and my grandmother's not doing well, so dealing with a little bit of sickness in the family. But other than that, just went to see my son run on Friday morning. I just feel like I've been in the car nonstop for the last week. What about you?
I've been very busy with the podcast. Very busy. Listen, when you don't know what you're doing and you're trying to start from ground zero, knowing nothing.
Don't let Lisa fool you. She's our sound engineer and our splice and dice and marketing person, and I drive all over creation, and then I just pop in for an hour and drink some tequila and we record stuff.
Well, listen, I even had some of my friends tell me today at work, and I've had other people text me, show us the video. We want to see the videos. And I'm like, we're not ready to show those yet.
Yeah, we'll have to do that.
We're still trying to figure out the lighting and even with the microphone, so we'll get it figured out at some point. And really, they've all the videos have been pretty decent since the first one. Now, of course, last week I forgot to hit record on the video side of it, so we only have audio for our episode 4. We have no video because I thought I hit record, and then like a week before that or 2 weeks before that, I didn't hit stop after we recorded that episode, and so the audio and the video ran for 4 hours.
And that will be on the blooper reel because that should not have been recorded, I'm certain.
No.
Well, before we get started, you better put that down because you're going to spit it out. So before we get started, I think we have a little bit of a rumor to address.
Okay.
And his name is Rod.
Good old Rod.
And he is famous or infamous, we're not sure which, from our first episode.
Yes.
And gotten a lot of comments about that. So, do you want to tell the story or do you want me to do it?
I can do it since it's my friend that's mutual. Okay, so you may have to jump in to refresh my memory because I haven't thought about this since we've texted about it. So, good old Rod, who we thought Mandy blocked, and he was the one texting, hey, sexy girl, all this. So, anyway, my friend listened to our podcast, and so she texted me a couple of days after and said, I am dying to know. Can you ask Mandy? Well, basically, she wanted me to find out if your Rod was the same Rod that she was talking to. So I thought, surely not, but let me ask. So then I text you, and I said, I'll go and say it. Send me a picture. Let me see a picture of him, okay? So I get a picture of Mr. Rod, and then my friend texts back and says, oh my God, that's him. So then I texted you, and I was trying to tell you about it, but it was late at night.
Yes.
And so anyway, my other friend obviously has been talking to Rod as well.
Yes.
On the same dating website.
I was laying in bed when Lisa texted me, and when she confirmed with her friend that it was the same Rod, and there are very similar stories of communication style, etc.
Yes.
I have been rolling about it. I mean, I was laying in bed and I was laughing so hard I was crying. So I could not wait to get to this part of the episode.
Well, that's what I was going to say is her response to me about how the communication goes with him. It was like the identical story of what you told me.
Yes.
On his communication style with you.
Yes.
So I'm wondering how long it's going to take for Rod to find out that we're talking about him on the podcast.
I don't know.
Because somebody's going to tell him.
Or the fact that he is his age. I don't think I have disclosed a lot about him. I did talk about someone else who was,
yes,
59. But old Rod is old enough to know better.
Rod is the one that said, "Hey, sexy girl," right?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yes. And then would go 4 days without saying anything, even though we had talked on the phone and talked about meeting.
Yeah, same with my friend.
And then he would just go like, "Hey, what are you doing?" Just like 4 days later, "Hey, what are you doing?" And I'd be like, "Nothing, just doing."
Did you ever get a phone call from him?
We talked.
Same with her.
Yes.
At like random times.
Well, this was just one time, and then most of the time when he would randomly text me, because he did the sexy girl thing, I think twice, and I completely ignored him the first time, and then the second time I blocked him. But it would just be like, "Hey, what are you doing?" Like it's just random, like on a Sunday.
Yeah.
And I guess he was texting her, and then she would answer.
He
and
had
he
his
would,
list going.
Oh yeah,
I'm sure he was texting
he
just
probably
all of
copy
them.
paste.
Probably.
I think one day he actually said, "Hey, what doing?"
He's got his list going.
He's got
I wonder
his
how
list.
many girls he's talking
I
to.
don't know, but it's comical. He was an attractive
he's cute.
guy.
He's a
Yeah.
good-looking guy.
Yeah, he
he's
was
a
an
good-looking
attractive guy.
So I'll give him that. He cute. Hashtag
Yeah.
he cute though.
Yeah, he cute though.
So anyway,
THO.
I told both Mandy and my friend, I said, I'm sharing this next time we record an episode.
Oh yeah,
We got to keep everybody informed.
I couldn't wait because Rod is a celebrity and he doesn't even know it.
Well, speaking of immature behavior, we are going to be talking about the challenges of parenting today.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I don't even know where to start on this because I don't want to come across as like this is going to be an episode on us telling people how to parent or, the right way or the wrong way to do it. This is just us sitting around talking like we always do about the challenges of parenting, what our challenges are, what maybe some of our fixes are, and that's it. Okay, y'all? So
Yes.
don't be hating on us.
And don't come at us and
No.
be like, you did the wrong thing there. We probably did.
We know.
I mean,
And we did it again.
and yeah, and
We've
you
done it
learn
multiple
from
times.
experience. We've done the best that we could. And I would like to say, I'm very proud of our children.
Yes.
And the mistakes that we made along the way, I think made them who they are, but let's just hope there's not too much damage there.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I'm very fortunate that
Yeah.
my kids have turned out as well as they have. I think the first thing that I thought about were my parents and their parenting style. My parents were pretty strict. I always considered my parents to be strict parents. And looking back now, I don't know if they were really strict or just set healthy rules for us. We had curfews. We had to say, yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am, please, thank you, which I don't know if that's a parenting style, but to me, it's just teaching your children good manners. At least that's what we do here in the South is say yes, ma'am, and no,
For sure.
ma'am. We had chores that we had to do, especially on Saturdays. Before we went anywhere on Saturday night, we had to have our chores done. So, just that type of stuff. But just speaking on them individually, my dad, and I've always said this, when I think of my dad, I always think of him as being a provider and a protector. I always have described my dad like that. I don't ever remember being afraid of being at home, being out somewhere. If my dad was with me, I don't ever remember being scared or afraid of anything. he provided. Now, we lived paycheck to paycheck, and we didn't have a lot of extra spending money, and we didn't go on vacations every year and do that sort of thing. But I never worried about if we were going to eat or, if we were going to lose our house. We had used cars, so we, like I said, we lived paycheck to paycheck, but we didn't live some extravagant lifestyle. With that being said, we never had any debt either. My dad did not allow credit cards, so we paid for things if we had the money for it. We didn't accrue debt. So I didn't appreciate that when I was younger, but the older I got, I've always remembered that. And so I try to keep very low debt, other than like your mortgage, obviously. I can't go paying for a house, but so yeah, for him, it was always being a provider and a protector. And then my mom was just kind of like the all-in-one. She worked, we had dinner unless we were at the ballpark or something. She cooked. She always was cleaning on the weekends. She was taking us wherever we needed to go. She was all of that. Chauffeur, cook, maid, whatever you want to call it. So she did all that, and she was very supportive. She was always at anything that we ever did. She was a very present, hands-on mom. So I feel like I was very fortunate with the parents that I had.
Yeah, you definitely were. My childhood was a lot different than that. My parents divorced when I was 8, and my mom had to, play the role a lot of provider. And, fortunately or unfortunately, it made me who I am. I'm wildly independent. I am.
You are very independent.
Very self-sufficient. Do things on my own, not afraid of anything. But I think a lot of that was some of that latchkey kid, Gen X type upbringing. I had grandparents in my life who were very stable, and they did a lot. My mom worked a lot, and so her parents sometimes would pick me up from school when I was like in elementary school. And then as I got a little bit older, I stayed home a lot by myself. I mean, I remember cutting grass at 9 years old with a push mower because it had to be done. I did a lot of the chores at home, not because they were assigned to me, but because my mom was not there. Yeah. She was working a lot. And then I had a very, very close relationship with my dad's parents. And, but my mom somehow, between working 2, 3, sometimes 4 jobs, little odd jobs, in addition to her regular 8 to 5 or whatever she had, she was always at my games and always at my activities, which looking back now, it's a miracle that she was able to do that and juggle it where she never missed my activities. Right. So I always remember her being present and being at my games or, anything that I did. I was involved in a lot. I have always been involved in a lot. Being in beauty pageants when I was younger, dance team. I was on the gymnastics team. We've already talked about our illustrious softball career. We cheered. I took horseback riding lessons when I was maybe 6. I did not lack for anything because of my grandparents. I saw my dad sporadically. I do remember feeling a lot of stress as a child, an overwhelming amount of stress about how we're going to be able to make it. I remember several times coming home and our power would have been cut off, or our gas would have been cut off, or our phone was turned off. And I don't say any of these things for pity. I don't say any of these things to shame my mother, because she was doing the very best that she could. But it is something that was natural around my house. And so I think that's one reason that I work very hard, and I have a very strong work ethic, is I've always tried to provide for my children in that way, and I've probably overcompensated in some areas just because my childhood was that way, and I felt insecure a lot. And by insecure, I mean I didn't feel that security and that safety.
Yeah.
So I feel like I had to try to create it for myself.
For me, my parenting, mine has changed over the years. I don't parent my kids the same way. Like, I remember us getting parented the same way. We had all the same rules. The only thing that I remember that was different was my brother had, I think it was a 30-minute later curfew because he had to get his date home and then drive to where we lived. So his was always a little bit later. I never parented, I don't think, now my kids may say something differently, but I don't think I parent my kids the same way because they're all different and they need different parenting. We have phones now, we have Life 360, so I can always see where my boys are. So I don't really give them a curfew. I can always see where they are and get a hold of them. That was different with my daughter. She had a curfew and I needed to know where she was going to be, and then she had to be home at a certain time. So I think we parent differently depending on the times and what we want from our childhood and what we don't want from our childhood.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also when they are young, we've talked about this in a former podcast, you are responsible for their every move. I know everybody's out here saying, duh, I'm stating the obvious, but when they come home from the hospital, you can't leave the room basically without your child or knowing where your child is. You can't leave them unattended for 5 minutes, and they depend on you for everything. And slowly but surely that starts going away. And when they're toddlers, it's I do myself. I do myself, and they start gaining that independence, and it's up to us to learn where those lines are and what do we allow them to do by themselves, and then what do we still manage. And I never wanted to be that overbearing, nagging mother, but I was definitely
that was me.
I was definitely
that.
a disciplinarian.
Yeah.
I mean, I can remember a friend of mine called me one time. She heard grunting in the background. She said, "What is that?" And I said, "It's my boys doing PT. If they've got enough energy to run that mouth, they've got enough energy to do push-ups and sit-ups."
That's right.
You know, so I was a very strong disciplinarian because I felt like I had to be, and I feel like I raised them pretty close to by myself. So I had to keep some sort of control in the house and not have chaos.
When they're that young, from like infancy through the toddler years through early childhood, you have most of the control. You have all of it, and then you try to give up a little bit of, or you have to give up some of it when they start school. But I tell young moms, don't wish these years away, because it is a very tiresome season when you've got I don't know, at least 1 to 6 years where they're basically, with you or daycare or pre-K, but you have so much control of their lives and what they do. And I don't think people appreciate that enough, because once they hit school and they have other influences like other friends, they start seeing things on TV, social media, and it's so much harder to control what they see or say, and so you'll miss those days. But it's very tiresome. But the older they get, it's just new stresses, it's new problems, and the consequences become more severe, which is what always worried me the most, because I knew the older that they got, the consequences would be worse. And I wanted to do everything that I could to try to drill it in their heads. Do not act this way. Do not do this, because you could have lifelong consequences.
Yes. And it gets real. And you're right. Their friends, their friend group, if that's one piece of advice that I can give any young mother that's listening, it is, please take charge and try to get them with a good friend group. And if you notice that they are going down the wrong path, I don't care what it takes. Move to a new neighborhood. take them to a different school. I don't care, because a lot of people follow their friends and one ends up in trouble and they're all in trouble. Yeah. And it's just those negative influences. Or you're guilty by association.
Being a parent is hard, and sometimes we just don't want to do the hard work. Yeah. It's just easier to say, go watch TV or go get on your iPad. And I'm not judging. I've done that before.
Sure.
But obviously hindsight is 20/20. So let me give some unsolicited advice, which is pretty much what this whole episode is going to be about. I'm just speaking from experience, what my experience is. You have the power. And I don't care if somebody wants to call me a helicopter mom. Like, I'm over all that. Yeah. I don't care.
Who cares?
You can think I'm overbearing all you want. You don't live in this household. You don't know the conversations that we have. And you don't know what struggles we have or not.
And you don't deal with the consequences.
No, absolutely. Yeah. So I will be as overbearing with my children as I need to be up until a certain point or a certain age.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not an idiot. I know when it's time to back off. And if you think I'm being a helicopter parent because I'm still have these massive rules maybe on a child that's still in their mid to late teens, well, maybe it's because that child still needs those overbearing rules.
Sure.
So I don't want to hear it.
Well, and let's be honest, there is a huge difference between boys and girls, and this is not bashing one sex over the other. It is just a scientific fact that boys do not have their frontal cortex or whatever it's called, their frontal lobe.
Or whatever, yeah.
You can tell I'm a scientist, right?
We really know what we're talking about. Keep listening to us.
Yeah. Frontal lobe not fully developed until they're 25. And sometimes they are very reactionary. And so someone pushes their buttons, they're going to run them off the road, or they're going to do this or do that just in the spur of the moment, because it's a reaction, an emotional reaction. And if you have not prepared them to deal with those things, unfortunately, at 25, it doesn't stop.
I've told them on several occasions, even when they're going through a hard time, whether it's a breakup or maybe losing a pet or family member or whatever, you have to deal with things in a healthy way. And I know we've talked about that on here before. But if you learn at a young age how to deal with things that are bothering you, it becomes repetitive. And when that happens repeatedly in life, because it will, it doesn't make it easy, but you still have the mindset of what you need to do in a way that's not damaging to yourself or other people, because you know that you've gotten through it before. You've dealt with things in the past in a good way, so you know that you can again. Yeah. And I never did that when I was younger.
No, I don't think that I dealt with things in a healthy way.
I don't even know if I dealt with things really.
I sort of dealt with them, but dealt with them by just saying, you know,
doing whatever.
Yeah, doing whatever and saying, forget this, I'm going to do what I want. And I think I had a rebellious spirit. I think anybody who knows me from when I was younger would agree with that. But I think a lot of that, obviously subconsciously, I didn't do it on purpose, but I think a lot of that was like this anger acting out. And that was the way that I dealt with it. So things that frustrated me at home, or, you know, relationship problems at home, or things like that, my way of dealing with it was to just be rebellious. And I still think I'm grown. I'm 50, but I thought I was grown. Yeah. And you weren't going to tell me otherwise, right? I'm very strong-willed, very stubborn, very persistent, and I'm going to do what I want. And I think that's very good if you channel it the right way. It's very bad if you don't.
Yeah. That makes me think about how communication is so important. This isn't a slam on my parents. It's just how it was. And I think a lot of it was maybe some of their upbringing. Because the farther back you go in generations, it seems like there was less communication that would go on in the household. So I don't really remember ever having like a lot of just deep serious conversations with my parents. Now, I think my sister probably did because she just, shared everything, especially with my mom. I was always a lot more private. And when things would bother me, I just didn't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
And I took that on into adulthood. So a lot of that was probably my personality. But I try to talk to my kids about a lot of things. And I think I've done a better job of that the longer I've had kids.
Yeah.
So I don't know that my daughter could say that I talk to her as much about things as maybe my youngest child. Of course, if you brought them in here right now, they probably all say, no, you never talk to us about anything. But I do. I just think it's important to communicate with your kids no matter what, even if they don't want to hear it. Because maybe in the moment they're rolling their eyes or they're thinking, oh my gosh, Mom, I don't want to hear this again. But I think if the time came where they needed to come to you about something, they would feel more comfortable about it because of the communication line that's open, and maybe they feel like they could trust you more.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think my oldest son, I probably made more mistakes with him. The youngest one, I think we are a little more alike, and although I'm sure he doesn't tell me everything, he tells me a lot of things. And we have a great line of communication. One thing I wanted to share that I don't know, it punched me in the gut, and it may punch someone else in the gut too that maybe is in this situation or has been in this situation. And I'm just going to butcher this because I can't remember her name, but she gives relationship advice, and I think she does have a podcast, and she typically is talking to couples, and she's an older African American lady, and she said in a little clip that I heard this week that she was a terrible mother, and it caught my attention, obviously, and I listened to it, and she said, I was a terrible mother because I was too busy being the protector and the provider. And I did not have time to be the nurturer. It wasn't that I didn't care.
Yeah.
But you talking about your dad and your mom having those very specific roles made you feel safe because you got both. It's not every scenario, but I think single moms that are fighting for their lives every day to keep the lights on and to keep the bills paid and the food on the table, it is hard. And I think maybe that's why I was much more of a disciplinarian, because I felt like I'm raising these young men. And they're not going to be perfect, but there's a lot of young men raised by their mothers, their grandmothers. They turn out really well, and there's a lot that don't.
Right.
It's because they have no man in the house. And for me, I think that hit home with me. I have always been so busy being their protector, being their provider, that I'm not always, and I'm not saying I haven't done it, but I don't think I've done a good job of being the mom that when they come home from school, I have the fresh cookies and the milk sitting out for them, and let me help you with all your homework. I mean, I felt like a lot of days I was so frazzled and so tired just trying to get through the day.
Yeah.
And I just want to give encouragement to mamas that are out there that are doing their best. Don't feel guilty when you see again on social media somebody's highlight reels and how they crush berries every morning to make their homemade ink for their note cards that they send to school. If you're backing out of the driveway throwing a Nutri-Grain over the back of the seat, and that's the best you can do to make sure that your child gets breakfast, at least they know that you're there for them.
Right.
So don't beat yourself up, but that really hit home with me. Is I think, wow, I should have been a lot more of a nurturing, mothering, and there were times I was, but for the most part, I was busy handling business.
Well, again, it goes back to personalities. By nature, I'm not a very encouraging person, and I don't coddle. Mm-hmm. And I've always been like that. Can I be encouraging at times? I suppose. But as strange as it sounds, especially coming from a woman, because most women, that's easy for them to just be encouraging, and it's just, to me, honestly, it feels kind of strange. And I think it's because I like tough love, and I don't like, as I always say, a lot of fluff. Mm-hmm. I don't want you to blow smoke up my rear end. Mm-hmm. I don't want you to tell me that I'm good at something if I'm not. I want you to give me constructive criticism so I can get better. And the tough love, and let's lay it on the table. Let's have a direct conversation, get to the point, and then we'll do better from there. And because that's how I respond, that's how I give.
So that's what I desire and appreciate at work. I think I'm doing a better job forcing myself to have the gift of exhortation. And it's not ever fake. If I say, I love your shoes, I really love your shoes. I'm not coming up with something. There are a lot of people who do that, surface level, or they think, oh, this person just needs to hear it. I'm just trying to do a better job, because I can be like an M&M, very hard on the outside and I'm sweet on the inside. But I'm trying to do a better job, because I don't want to go to my grave and someone ever wonder how I feel about them.
So you said earlier about the lady saying that she was a horrible mom, and this was her reason, which sounds like a good reason.
Yeah.
A very valid reason. And listen, I was not the best mom at times, and a lot of that it was my own choices that I was making.
Sure, me too.
I don't think it was necessarily that I was always making dumb decisions consciously. I mean, it's like you are, but you don't know what those consequences are going to lead to, even though I should have. But, I could go on and on about this. And so at the end of the day, your family suffers from your poor choices. And there's a lot of guilt that I have over certain periods of my life where I felt like at times I was a great mom. Mm-hmm. And then there were periods where I was a horrible mom. I would think that my daughter would remember more of that just because she's older versus my younger child.
Yeah. And I think, 10 years, 15 years does a lot to mature us. I think I'm a very different mother than I was 15 years ago.
Absolutely.
I will say it's been tough. I cried like a baby when my youngest went to college, because that made me kind of an empty nester. A lot going on at home. Seems to be a common thread in all of my stories, was a lot going on at home. But I cried like a baby. He was my last quote unquote purpose. I think we as mothers find purpose in our children, and we have to be careful not to let that be our only focus, but still keep that balance of that person in our lives having a very prominent role.
Yeah.
And it's definitely shifted and shaped over the years. And I think, again, back to my point about them being infants and toddlers, and the nights that you put them in that toddler bed 15 times and they keep getting up and they want water and they won't go to bed, those you feel like they will never end. And then you blink and they're going to middle school, and then you blink again and they're graduating from college. But I am really loving where I am right now in my life with my relationship with my boys. I feel like I have such a close relationship with them, and our conversations are different, and we're just friends now. It feels good to be their friend. And still, they ask you for advice, but it's a different type of thing where you're not their disciplinarian.
Yeah. Well, I think along the lines of communication, it's tricky because I want to share things with my kids. Well, I'll put it this way. I will harbor on certain things or hound my children on certain things because I don't want them to make the same mistakes that I did. And listen, do I share everything with my kids? No, they don't need to know all of the dumb choices that I made throughout my life.
Sure.
But I think it does help to share some things, to let them know we've been where you are before. We understand. So talk to me about it and let me help you through this. Or, which I've done in many cases, I don't want you to make the same mistake that I made, and this is the mistake that I made. Let me tell you, and let me tell you what those consequences were so that you don't make those same mistakes.
And I'm not telling you for my health.
No.
I'm not telling you this because I want you to be miserable or I think I know it all. It is because I can see your future.
Yes.
And I don't want you to hurt. I don't want you to have the pain that I had. I don't want you to have the regret or to have to look back. And quite honestly, my youngest one, he is just like me. And he's asked me some pretty hard questions. And I've answered them. And that didn't feel good.
Yeah.
And we were driving down the road, and I remember tears coming out because it was a hard conversation. He's asked me some very hard questions. And I was honest with him. And I don't regret that, but it is tough to get to that place of vulnerability because you want to be their guidance and their confidant, and you don't want to admit that you don't have it all together, but you also want to warn them and say, do as I say, not as I did.
Exactly. I'm on a couple of Facebook pages, and parents legitimately will get on there and voice a concern about their child that's off at college, or they'll ask a question. And you would be surprised at the comments that come through there talking about being a helicopter parent. You need to just back off and let them figure it out for themselves, or kids will be kids, or, and all of that is true. But at the same time, if you expect me to let my children make some of the same mistakes that I did, and I'm going to sit back and not say anything because kids will be kids, or that's going to make me a helicopter parent, you're crazy. You're out of your mind. No way am I going to sit back and allow my children to go down a path that I know is not only non-beneficial, but can have severe or lifelong consequences. I'm not going to do it.
And if they still do it anyway, that's on them.
That is on them.
And then
Absolutely.
they have to pay it.
Absolutely.
But at least you've had that conversation and you have concern for them.
Right.
That's another thing that I think I was that person about. We've got to let them figure it out. When my oldest was in middle school, and I would see people say, they forgot their lunch at home.
Right, exactly.
4 times in a row. Like, I've got to take it up to the school, or they forgot their notebook, or they forgot their homework. My rule was, okay, I'm going to bring it to you once.
Right.
And you're not going to starve.
Right.
But after that, you may have to scrape up some money and get something in the lunchroom. So people that don't allow their children to have any consequences for their actions, but that's not what you're talking about.
And you know what? Those aren't detrimental and lifelong consequences.
That's right.
That's making them remember next time to not forget.
Yes.
Their
and
lunch
if you
money
go hungry,
you'll eat in 3 hours when you get home.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You probably had breakfast.
Yes.
So, yes. Again, it's all about balance. But when people throw out comments like that, it makes parents feel like it's not a safe place.
Right.
It's a parent page for a reason.
Yeah.
And we're on there to answer questions and be supportive. If you don't like a question that someone asked, then
Scroll
be
on.
quiet.
Yeah.
Get that finger and keep scrolling it up, and you can just move right on. You don't have to comment with your smart comment.
And it doesn't affect your day. And it doesn't affect your child. So move on.
And again, maybe that it doesn't affect your child, and maybe you don't have to remind your child to take their backpacks.
Mm-hmm.
But this lady over here, she might have a child that forgets it once a week. Mm-hmm. Okay, so it's a different scenario. If you don't like it, move on.
Yeah.
it's not your issue to worry about anyway.
Yeah.
But you'll have other issues you're going to be worrying about, I guarantee you that.
Well, and there's mothers that have a lot of fears, because there are things going on at home that nobody knows about. And so everybody just needs to give everybody grace. Yeah. We touched on this in another episode too. If you breastfeed, then you're a granola and you think you're better. And if you bottle feed, you're a horrible mother and you should be, breastfeeding. And then it's, did you have an epidural? Because I didn't. Well, I had to have a C-section. Well, I didn't. It's not a competition. And then it's,
right.
My baby started walking at 9 months. Well, congratulations. I mean, maybe they'll be president. Or maybe they will be working,
you know what?
In a ditch.
Who cares? Because my daughter did not start walking until she was 15 months. And guess what, people? She was in the gifted program at a very, very successful high school and does well for herself today. And she was a late bloomer. So I don't want to hear it.
Yeah, same. Mine was 17 months old.
There you go.
And went to a school for the gifted. And he is fine. And I have never seen on a job application, what age did you start walking?
People don't care.
No, but it's always a competition.
Yes.
And then they're bashing mothers. Well, if you work, you're a terrible mother. If you stay home, again, you are sheltering your kids and you think you're better than everybody. And if you homeschool, or if you send them to public school, or if they went to daycare or they didn't go to daycare, there is always something to say. And just keep a pushing.
Yeah.
It's not your business. It's not your consequence to deal with. It's not your choice. You don't have to deal with my budget. Right. You don't need to worry about where I'm sending my child. But
my kid started talking at 7 months old. No, they didn't.
I mean,
but okay.
First of all, no.
Okay, no, they didn't, but okay. But again, for parents who that it does affect them, I'm just here to tell you, I had a child that was in the gifted program all throughout school, and she didn't start walking until she was 15 months old, and she was 5 days late being born. So she was just always going to be a late bloomer. To this day, she's still late. She can't get to anything on time, but she's very successful, and very smart, and has a good head on her shoulder. So don't let the small things get to you, especially when you're a young new mom, because trust me, it's not that important.
No,
those things are not important, and it's not really going to matter.
No, and each child is different. Both of my kids are like night and day. They are completely different. And the youngest one was in the gifted program too, and you would never know it. Not because he's not smart. Don't hear that. He's very smart, but he was more interested in sports and other things, and he could care less.
Yeah.
And the oldest one is just a different animal. And so they're all different. And they were both raised by me.
Us touching on all this is something that I wanted to talk about anyway. We tell our kids to not submit to peer pressure, but it needs to be the same for young parents. Well, even parents, period, because some parents take it, years down the road. But it's very hard to go against the grain and to not feel like you have to do what other parents are doing, or even what your child's friend group parents do. And it is difficult to not be able to either do it for financial reasons, or maybe you just have different beliefs, or whatever the case is. Maybe you just don't want to go down that road. I would just encourage parents to do your own thing and really try to not worry about what everyone else thinks. I know it's easy for me to say now because I'm kind of at the end of that, and I've made my mistakes along the way. Just do what you think is best for you and your children and your family, and be okay with that.
Yeah. And you don't owe anybody an explanation. No. And if you explain it once and they don't get it, then that's on them.
That's right.
I think we put so much pressure on ourselves as parents, especially as mothers. We're trying to spin all the plates, keep all the balls in the air, and sometimes it's okay to let them have a snack and sit in the floor and watch a TV show. Their brain's not going to rot out, But at the same time, it's not okay to plop them in front of the TV 24 hours a day because you don't feel like dealing with it. You know?
And if you want to have an over-the-top party for your child, I don't care. I'm not judging you for it. So that's not what I'm saying. But the point I'm trying to make is, if this person over here wants to throw an over-the-top birthday party for their child, that's fine. But you shouldn't have to feel like that's what you need to do for your child.
Yeah.
Whether you can afford to do it or not. There's a lot of times where I think, man, I would love to just get back to how it was when we were kids and start making our own cakes again. Just a plain old chocolate cake in one of those plastic, cake holder things or whatever they were. Put your own candles on there, write your own writing and icing, and have some games and streamers and just do all that. And if that's what you want to do, then do it. But the flip side of that is, if you're not that mom or that dad and your child attends a party that's maybe a little bit more low-key, then let your child know that that's okay.
Yeah.
That it doesn't have to be over the top.
Yeah.
That it's okay to do it this way or that way. That's the other thing that we have to talk to our kids about. It's okay when things are done differently. And when things aren't done how we like to do them.
Yeah. And because
it's not right or wrong.
Becky had a pony does not mean... you have to have a pony.
Just spit everywhere.
You do not have to have a pony and a clown, okay? Like, we're not Tommy Toppet here. We're not going to keep Tommy Topping it up. You got this, so I got that. I mean, we needed a little lighthearted laughter in there. But, I mean...
Yeah, but the way I just spit, I laughed at that. It was a little awkward.
Becky had a pony. So, I mean, yeah, I agree with that. And, oh my gosh, that is the designer clothes and, the same Becky that had a pony, she's the one who's got the nicest clothes, and now she's driving a Range Rover and she's 16, and my child is driving a 78 Pinto. We've got to teach our children to not be so caught up in material things too, and to be kind to other people that don't have
because
the
it's
same
okay
things.
to have that stuff. If
It
you
is.
can afford it,
It is.
then it's fine to have all that. But we have to make sure that our kids know it's okay if you don't have
That's
all
right.
that as well. It doesn't change the person that you are
Right.
as a parent or a child.
Right, and it does not make you better, and it does not make you worse.
No.
That's something we all could learn, including adults.
Exactly. I guess in closing, and then you can touch on anything that you want, just be grateful for the season that you're in with your kids, because trust me, it will fly by and you will be on to the next, and it will fly by and then you will be on to the next, and before you know it, you're an empty nester. So it's like with anything, just try to focus on the good. I know you're tired. Trust me, I know that you're tired. Mamas, dads, or both. I know that you're tired, but this too shall pass, and it will. It will pass. So just try to be grateful for the season that you're in with your children. And I think at the end of the day, we just want what's best for our kids, and we're humans and we make mistakes, and so we have to give ourselves grace as parents. But I think it's important that we let our kids know that we're humans and that we make mistakes.
Yes.
And so just own up to your crap. Just own up and apologize, which I could certainly do better about that. Especially with parenting, I tend to think that I know what I'm talking about when I tell my children to do something, and my way of telling them is how it needs to be said or done. So it's hard for me to kind of go back on that. But listen, if mistakes are made and wrong choices are made, we have to let our children know that. And then, and in turn, they learn to admit their mistakes and apologize when necessary.
I think one thing that I want to piggyback on what you said is also give grace. Give grace to your kids, because they're not perfect. And sometimes they are under a pressure that we have forgotten how that feels. to be 15, to be 16, to be feeling like you don't fit in anywhere, or you're having issues maybe with your parents or issues with your friend group or whatever it happens to be, give your kids grace. And then adversely, you need to give your parents grace.
Yes.
They made mistakes too.
That's right.
And I remember the day that I realized my parents weren't perfect, and so I think they're human too.
Right.
And giving them grace and giving your kids grace and hoping that they're going to reciprocate one day, because we're not perfect and we do make mistakes. And like you said, own your crap, apologize, take accountability, have integrity, be a stand-up person. If they ask you a direct question, even though it might be embarrassing or not something that you want to share, explain to them as best you can why it's not the best way to do things.
Right.
I've made mistakes. We all have, some to a greater degree. But just do your best. And I have to think too, when I'm giving grace to my parents, they did the best that they could do at the time with what they had. And that means knowledge, resources, everything. They did the best that they could at that time. And had I not had all of those circumstances, I would not be who I am today.
Yeah. Well, and listen, for myself, I will even say at times I didn't do the best that I could do. And I know that. Like, I'll never go through life saying, well, I did the best that I could do. No, I didn't. In the 31 years that I've been a parent, I could name several times in my life, whether it was a split second decision or months or years worth of bad choices. So I have to be honest with myself and say, I wasn't always the best mom, and I didn't always do the best that I could. And there's nothing I can do about it now, other than not do that again, not make those same, stupid choices again.
Yeah.
But I think at the end of the day, we all really want what's best for our kids, and we're just trying to figure it out just like they are.
Sure. Well, and I think having accountability for yourself is more important than maybe having accountability for others, because we judge ourselves by our intentions and we judge others by their actions.
Right. As usual, our conversations always turn out great, and we always have a lot to say. So hopefully our unsolicited advice will help a few out there.
Yeah, I hope it'll help somebody.
And if not, and if we've rambled, at least you know that we understand where you are in life and we've been there. And
yeah, certainly you can identify with some things we said. And if not, we've had a great margarita, a great conversation like we do every week.
Right.
And we'll see you next time.
That's right. All right. See y'all. Bye.
Bye.